My name is Alfred. A couple of years ago, I had started writing my PhD in philosophy about collaboration. I realized that collaboration is deeply rooted within society, something that we have to rediscover in light of the new tools available today. So I set out on a knowledge journey, traveling to the birthplace of modern technology, the Bay Area in California. I wanted to talk to some of the leading practitioners in the field, hoping to uncover clues and insights into the new possibilities for collaboration.
Collaboration, in my view, is multiple people working on the same problem and exchanging ideas.
Interdisciplinær kollaboration er helt centralt i fremtiden for at skabe videnbaserede løsninger.
Anybody who creates a system that's too insular, that just becomes a recipe for making themselves obsolete.
How many patients have turned to me and said, when are we going to have a solution? When my sister's dying, my mother, do we have a cure coming? And I turn to the scientists that I know and I think, oh no.
In the research space, the incentives we have at the moment are quite perverse. They actually set up in a way that discourages people from effectively communicating the research they do.
Apparently, practicing collaboration is not an easy task, and may in fact be one of the biggest challenges for our generation.
The world has really shifted from a world that's about content to being a world that's about context. And in some ways, all of the notions of stability around knowledge are starting to break down. What we're doing in our classrooms today essentially is training our students for jobs of the 19th century. You know, we've just taken 200 years to perfect that. That idea of mechanistic learning has what's basically held sway in the classroom for the past 200 years. It works extremely well if you have a world that isn't changing very much. If knowledge is very stable, then the idea of transferring knowledge from one person to another, teacher to student, is actually remarkably effective. Now, the problem is, when you live in a world where that information is changing all the time, eventually the speed of change is going to outstrip our ability to transfer it.
An expert doesn't think. He just does what works and what has normally worked for him, and it will normally work. In chess, a master chess player just can make, within a few seconds, a high-level move. That's what's exciting about expertise. In driving, you just automatically, your foot comes up from the gas or goes on the brake. If you start thinking about why you should do this or when you should do this, you stop doing it well. Now that's important because that's what I consider sort of the breakthrough.
Every piece of knowledge functions both as explicit and tacit. And our belief is that in the 21st century, the tacit is becoming increasingly important. You've always had both, but the balance between the two has somewhat shifted.
All this thinking about what to do and memorizing what to do is getting in the way of the spontaneous doing. Of course, you can't just start that way. You've got to have lots of experience, take risks, lose sometime, win sometime. But if you do all that, then you can get to the point where you don't think anymore. And then you're really good. So there's something higher, namely intuition, that you have to have, which is leading you to see the situation in such a way that it draws you immediately to do the appropriate thing.
The essence of technology is in no way anything technological. It's people, it's humans, it's communication. And that's the thing we have to remember.
That's why they misunderstood the computers and thought they could be intelligent. They thought being intelligent was having the right rules in your mind and the right descriptions in your mind. And in fact, it wasn't like that at all.
Innovation is about imagination. It's about world building. It's about the ability to see things differently than they are. And I just don't see right now in the current framework of our school systems or our systems of learning any possibility for that to happen. In fact, I think in K through 12, when we find those students that are doing that, we medicate them. Right? We call them ADD or ADHD and tell them that they're daydreaming and can't concentrate and can't focus and can't memorize and can't do the boring repetitive tasks. And we devalue that. We don't encourage innovation. What we do is we end up minimizing perhaps the bad at the expense of completely obliterating all that could be excellent or that could be that source of imagination. And without that, I think that, we constantly strive for mediocrity. You could get by with that in the last millennium. Don't think you can in the 21st century.
Der er åbent 24 timer i døgnet. Du kan komme ned og lave, hvad du har lyst til. Der er ikke nogen, der holder øje med dig. Der er ikke nogen, der kontrollerer, hvad du laver. Alt, hvad vi har herinde, er køkkenudstyr. Så det er et frirum. Du kan komme ind og fra dag 1 lave, hvad du har lyst til i det her rum. Jeg startede biologigaragen af flere årsager. Dels var jeg frustreret omkring nogle af de ting, jeg oplevede på universitetet. Hvordan jeg i forbindelse med egne forskningsprojekter ikke kunne samarbejde med grupper på det samme institut. Og så savnede jeg et rum, hvor jeg selv kunne gå ind og teste og bygge og lege.
All right, so Tuesday. All learning comes from a clash between freedom and constraint. And that those are the most productive kind of frictions you can have. We have this topic, we have this time period, we have this book, whatever it is that is your subject matter, that becomes your constraint. So how do you allow people the freedom within that to be creative, inventive, to engage their passion, to make it relevant to their lives? And that becomes the area of play.
I think that science, is something that everyone should be able to understand in terms of why it's successful and has been kind of the foundation for civilization to progress. I think that through open science and citizen science, it's one way of conveying that and getting people doing it.
Open science is really key because we're entering a new era where science is not just undertaken in the ivory tower. Science needs to be undertaken by everyone. It actually is done by everyone already. We just aren't thinking of it that way. Open science is where real innovation and disruption come from.
It's important for a whole variety of reasons. I mean, one of the basic reasons is that the public, for the most part, funds research. It's reasonable for the people, the taxpayers who fund this, to have access to that research. Some of those taxpayers are the parents of children with diseases, or they have family members with conditions they'd like to learn more about.
In my own particular quest, the challenge has been for a non-professional genomicist to make sense of the data and to use it and to make progress in understanding the genetic causes of what is affecting my daughter. In some ways, my daughter's situation is very much a microcosm for many, many children and adults.
So having access to real research literature is a real value to them over trusting summaries or other information on the web which might not be up to scratch.
The World Wide Web is one of the most popular applications of the internet, and it's simply another manifestation of the desire people have to communicate with each other and to share information. The whole history of civilization is advancing through the sharing of information. I think having multiple perspectives really helps. For me personally, the most productive way of working is standing next to someone in front of a whiteboard, sketching ideas out and comparing them and debating and arguing over what's the right way forward. And it's the bouncing of ideas back and forth that stimulates creativity.
There are wonderful examples of citizen science where, by putting a problem online and letting anyone who wants to engage with that problem and help to solve it.
The best recent example I can think of is the success of this game called Fold It, which allowed a group of amateurs to solve the structure of a virus related to HIV. It's in monkeys, actually. And they were able to do that in about 3 weeks, whereas it took scientists, for the past 15 years, they were unable to solve this. So it was one example where things lined up just the right way, where we were able to pair up human pattern recognition skills also with the strengths of computers and sort of have them complement one another.
So by placing information online, you give people the opportunity to both engage with it, to understand it, to use it for themselves, but also for other people to build the systems that will let wide ranges of people engage with that research and contribute to it.
The idea of letting 20,000 people fail and only one of them needs to be right? That's a really powerful, open source works that way too, right? Is that you put out a problem and everybody tries to answer it and only one person needs to be right. As opposed to, the more cathedral model of software development, for example, where everything needs to be right and everybody needs to be right every time. If you put those two models against each other in competition, guess which one's going to win every single time? And it doesn't matter, you can expand the number of people trying in the open source model, and that just makes it more likely you'll succeed. You expand the number of people working in the cathedral model, that's more room for error.
That's all part of this whole wisdom of the crowds idea. It applies to certain things if you can structure the task properly. It doesn't work all the time, which you can easily get kind of a mob that's not intelligent, it's not a wise crowd. If your expertise or your area seems like it's becoming under threat by the rise of, these unskilled amateurs who can suddenly do it, then they often have a hostile reaction. We need to look at the data, we need to be empirical about it and see where the wisdom of crowds works and where it's limited, but it's very clear that it does work for some things very well and in science.
So one of the real challenges for scientific information in particular, research information in general, is the question of validation, certification. How do you tell that a claim is incorrect in specific ways?
There are a lot of problems with peer review. The biggest problem is that it takes 12 months and all you get out at the end of it are just 2 opinions. It's sort of commonplace that a peer reviewer may be biased when they read the paper because they just don't like that kind of style of research or it's competitive with theirs. The general 2 people is simply not a representative sample size. So we have a system where we wait 12 months for something that's actually not a very high quality process. I think the way to fix it is to surface the opinions of the whole scientific community in real time. I think that that is how I see the evolution of peer review.
PageRank was an attempt to really bring bottom-up ranking into the web. Previous to that, within the same project that Larry Page and Sergey were working in, along with me and some other faculty, we were applying information retrieval techniques that tried to judge the quality of materials either through human curation, so some person said this is good, this is bad, this is relevant, or through internal text metrics. I would try to examine very carefully what's in a document, and on the basis of that say this one is more relevant or less relevant, and so on. And the insight that came with the web in general and in PageRank was that if there is a distributed ability of people everywhere to vote, in some sense, for individual items, tabulating that vote gives you a much better reading on what's important than trying to examine just what's in it. Because it can look very good but useless. It can be somewhat fragmentary but end up being very useful. In a way, this is what's always been done in the scientific literature. So you have a citation in my paper pointing to somebody else's paper, and they have the citation index, which says how many people have cited this particular work, and so on. And really, PageRank is an extension of that basic citation index idea to the web at large, which doesn't have the same kind of citations.
So there is a collaborative or a cooperative capability growing out of networking, making truth of the comment that many hands make light work.
People who connect different networks are in a great position to innovate. And people who can introduce different networks to each other can gain advantage by it, and so can those networks. I think you can make a good case that modern science is an innovation network. It used to be that you waited for an Aristotle or a Newton to come along and they would apprehend the universe in a new way. With the science that came along with Bacon, Descartes, and Galileo, we began to see scientists publishing their little observation, their little piece of data, and people putting together the small pieces of knowledge, much the way Wikipedia is put together today, building on each other.
How do we make sure that that research finds its way to the places where it can be used and finds its way as fast as possible? Because maybe we don't have to wait 10 or 20 or 50 years. And there are lots of problems we face for which we can't afford to wait 10 or 20 or 50 years.
The network's particular structure is important because the shape and dynamics of a network influence or even determine the kinds of things that the nodes in that network can do. Some of the recent empirical work seems to indicate that when you're talking about innovation in networks or generation of knowledge, that the diversity of the network is more important than the size or in the individual expertise of the members. I think that's a very important finding.
Det, som kan være uheldigt, det er, når man har en diskurs omkring, at alle skal kunne lave netværk, og alle skal kunne lave innovation, og alle får virkelig mange kurser omkring samarbejde og innovation, og hvordan de gør det, som udvander deres faglighed. Og det synes jeg er mega uheldigt, fordi du kan ikke have sådan et her miljø, uden at fagligheden for den enkelte er sindssygt skarp. Og så skal man så bare have et rum ved siden af, hvor man så den enkelte kan sætte deres viden i spil, få lov at teste i andre sammenhænge, og rent faktisk føle, at de kan bruge det til noget.
What we're starting to see is the birth and growth of what we call networks of imagination. That they have a strong lure for us because they give us a sense of presence, of being with others. They're usually happening in real time, and they're usually happening around solving problems that can't be solved on an individual basis. So they necessitate collaboration, they necessitate group work in order to get to the answer that people want.
Klimaområdet, fødevareforsyning, miljø og energi. Der er ingen enkelt forsker, der kan komme med løsninger på de komplekse, sammenspundne problemstillinger. Derfor er det vigtigt at samarbejde. I det her universitetssystem, der hvor det typisk går galt, det er der, hvor man skaber, hvad jeg kalder mentale parasitter. Det er folk, som kun udøver ting, som de ved, de får credit for. I det her tåbelige pointsystem, publikationer, hvad impact factor har det, hvor mange citationer man har, man kan lave sig en karriere på det. Men det kan man jo tydeligt fornemme, hvad det er, sådan en person er i systemet. Og det er der, man ikke indleder et samarbejde. Jeg har et enormt stort globalt netværk, som jeg mener, jeg har givet meget. Men jeg kan jo godt se bagefter, at jeg har fået endnu mere tilbage.
I don't think people really understand what collaboration is. Collaboration is about people being the best that they can be in the context that matters the most to them, rather than being what other people need them to be, or everybody being perceived as being equal. And there's something really powerful and beautiful about that idea of collaboration that's collective, that is about the group succeeding, not the individual.
It was becoming clear to me that the combination of well-practiced collaboration and our new technologies provided great possibilities for creating valuable knowledge. But the art of collaborating was much more complex than I had first anticipated. So, in an attempt to try and understand the conditions required for collaboration, I invited two very different networks, a Danish biotech company and a biohackerspace based in Copenhagen participate in a collaborative experiment.
Eksperiment eller forsøg går ud på at se, hvad man kan udvikle af laboratorieudstyr i et krydsfelt mellem en virksomhed og det her miljø.
Det er jo en utypisk samarbejde for os, men jeg tror, at vores måde, hvordan vi forsker, hvordan vi diskuterer i neuroscience, det er præget af en åben tilgang til, hvad der er uden for murene. Der er så meget og så mange entusiaster derude, som kan bidrage til, at vi finder bedre tekniske løsninger til vores processer, at man kan ikke sige nej til at gøre det.
Det er to meget forskellige miljøer. I den klassiske virksomhed, der har man typisk en forretningsplan, man har projektgrupper, man har få projekter, man har milestones, som man skal nå på bestemte tidspunkter, man har investorer, som igen skal gøres tilfredse. I de innovative biohackermiljøer, der har man en anden indgang, en anden tilgang til løsning af problemerne. Man bringer folk sammen med meget forskellig baggrund. Amatører og professionelle. De kan dække mange forskellige fagområder på hver deres måde, og det vil sige, at de løsninger, man kan nå frem til, kan blive helt anderledes.
I den slags miljøer opstår der helt klart nye måder at tænke på. Inspiration, som er anderledes end den, vi kan skabe i vores lidt forædlede type innovationsmiljø. Vi er en virksomhed, der bruger rigtig mange penge på forskning. Vi bruger over 1 milliard kroner om året i vores egen laboratorier. Og så er det alligevel sådan, at vi må jo erkende, at vi har 1200 videnskabsmænd, der løber rundt. De er meget dygtige, men de er jo kloner af hinanden. De tænker lidt ens. Selvfølgelig er de også forskellige, men det er stadigvæk et miljø, hvor man indavler måden at tænke metodikker. Det er det, der er drivkraften for, at vi gerne vil være med i LifeGate-eksperimentet.
Yeah. So the difficult part is getting just the colony you want because they're Vi vil meget nødigt stå tilbage som deres lille legetøj, eller sådan, at de egentlig bare gør med os, hvad der passer dem.
The companies that are trying to be as open as possible and engage with the community, but still be sustainable, the ones that succeed are going to be the ones whose community understands at the outset what their relationship is to the company. As long as that's clear, everything is fine. But if you try and change it in the middle, that's when you run into trouble.
Hvordan kommunikerer man, at de faktisk har ejerskab over det? At det ikke er, at vi vil noget specifikt, eller har en agenda, som vi ikke fortæller om. Og det har jeg ikke noget svar på. Det er jo derfor, vi laver det som et eksperiment.
Man skal holde det, man lover. Man skal være autentisk, og man skal være ærlig. Og en gammeldags dyder, altså bare opføre sig ordentligt, så løser man altså mange problemer. Ikke prøve at snyde hinanden og være generøs. I hvert fald for mig har det været en hovedhjørnesten at vælge personer, som jeg ved, man kan se ud fra deres personlige opførsel, at det vil fungere.
Hvis man skal skabe noget nyt, så har det meget med tillid at gøre. Og det har det faktisk også i vores industrielle sammenhæng. Når vi laver kontrakter, så er det klart, der skal stå, hvad handler det om. Og du kan jo, enhver kontrakt, enhver aftale kan tolkes. Men her i den her relation har det været tillid. Det har været en åbenhed omkring, hvad er det, jeg vil? hvad får jeg ud, hvad vil du få ud af det her, og se, hvor er fællesnævner.
The leap of faith that companies have to make, and I think there are possibilities for such relationships. We have to recognize that by opening up to the world, we're also going to permit what might happen to this that is unexpected or unanticipated, and we can't try to control that. I think there's ways for a company to do that wisely in terms of maintaining trade secrets, maintaining all sorts of ways of doing business and business advantages.
Vi startede jo ude med at prøve at lave en slags aftale, hvor vi netop havde tænkt de ting her igennem, som vi plejer at gøre. Typisk, som Novozymes involverer sig i nogle forskningsprojekter, er jo, at man simpelthen donerer nogle penge, eller man skriver en kontrakt, og så aftaler man jo på forhånd, hvordan ligger de rettigheder, og typisk vil det være enzymer, det ligger så hos os. Det giver ikke mening, fordi vi vil gerne være på de sociale medier, vi vil fortælle, hvad er der, vi gør i det her samarbejde. Det skift, vi har her nu, er, at vi simpelthen ikke laver en aftale, hvor vi vil beskytte de rettigheder til en bestemt teknologi.
When Bob and I published the first paper on the internet in 1974, we actively chose not to patent any of the technology for a very simple reason. We wanted there to be no barriers for anyone to take up the technology and use it. We were thinking, okay, the Defense Department should not be forced to use only one kind of computer in order to network them. It should be able to use any kind of computer and have all of them interact with each other. So we said there are no barriers. You don't have that excuse. You might have other excuses, but you don't have that excuse. Anyone who wanted to could build a piece of the internet and then find somebody to connect to so it would grow organically, which is exactly what happened.
At its core, there's something very insightful about copyright, and especially patents. You know, it was in Venice under the Medicis that they first invented patents, and it was a way for all these inventors who were creating things to actually make it known to the rest of the community, and that the government had to give an incentive for them to tell this information.
Patentsystemet har også en bagside. I det øjeblik patenter bliver hjemtaget for at blokere andre produktionsmetoder, for at forhindre udviklingen, for at forhindre konkurrenter, så sætter det udviklingen i stå.
It's interesting right now. I think that the two aren't mutually exclusive. Right? You can have openness and you can have for-profit.
Det er juristerne, det er dem, der ser i vores patentkontor. De skal måske ruskes en lille smule. Men for os andre, der har det aldrig været sådan, at vi ikke gerne ville arbejde sammen med nogen, selvom vi ikke fik lov til at få patenterne. Hvis det er metoder og teknologier, så er det mere sådan grundlæggende. Det er en værktøjskasse, så den deler man.
There was a time, even though I am young, where I didn't have the internet or I didn't have computers. I didn't use all those things. So there were times I couldn't answer my questions. There were times I didn't know where to go, or I would get lost, or I wouldn't be able to schedule things reasonably. And all those little mundane pieces are just like poetic moments that are reminders of all this infrastructure that operates around me that just change every little aspect of what I do and what other people do and what is possible. So being able to, for example, in a second, go on, Wikipedia and not just read an article about something I think I'm passionate about, and then I can also edit it, right? I can add new content on top of that, and I can change it. And I'm doing it because I know other people are going to come back the same road and find it, right? It's like that whole conception of having these little things that just totally change what is possible.
They're in it for the passion. They're in it because it just sounds cool. It's an interesting thing to do. It's something they're curious about. They just want to know, and that's enough. They don't have to have an endpoint. The means, the curiosity can be enough. I think that there's the whole idea of the hacker mentality is never about the end. It's always about the means. It's always about what is it that we can know that we don't know? What is it that's behind that door that we can't open? Right? And usually what's behind that door you can't open is another door. But that doesn't matter, right? The point is there's something here that we want to know, we want to get through, we want to get past. We have our curiosity and we demand that it be, dealt with, that it be met, that it be answered.
To get people from different circles, different cultures to collaborate, there has to be something of consequential common interest. So if I say politicians should talk to scientists or whatever, they don't have any good reason to. Right? Whereas if I say, okay, we're going to argue about global warming, and the result of that is going to be legislation that actually caps carbon, now all of a sudden they need to find a way to intersect those circles. They may fight, they may misunderstand, but there's the driving force to get them to focus on a common issue. And I think that's the way you get collaboration, is by having some active goal that you really want to deal with that requires inputs from both sides. It's not going to be something that you can just stay in your circle.
Nu kender jeg jo Labitat Biologigaragen, og jeg har ikke drømt, at det kommer til at være en visualiseret, fuldstændig designet udstilling. Der er rigtig mange folk, der er sessions, der bliver holdt foredrag, filosofer, kunststuderende. Jeg kan få kontakt med nogle folk fra resten af Europa, som brænder for det her, og synes, de opfra deres fritid og går ind for det her. Det har jeg ikke drømt om. Jeg er virkelig imponeret over det.
Når man så er ude der, hvor man personligt lærer, personligt forhandler og begynder at diskutere, og personligt kommer frem, så går det også bare meget, meget hurtigere. Ja, så er der en risiko for, at hvis man snubler, eller man får gjort nogle fejl, eller man dummer sig, så er man ude, så er man fremme.
I don't know if any philosophers ever talked about how important it is to make mistakes. But somehow the way to get knowledge that's valuable is this business of taking risks and making mistakes.
Det er der, hvor man bliver konfronteret med det. Det er der, du rammer ind i det. Det er der, man lærer. Og ja, jeg er da ikke perfekt i alt, jeg gør, men jeg sætter mig selv i spil og er her, og jeg lærer, mens jeg gør det.
And that's essentially learning, right? That's how we learn in this world.
And I think it's very important for people to understand that the value of the web is not inherent in the technology, it's inherent in the kinds of collaboration that people have used the technology to do.
I think we're moving from monetary economy to what now it actually doesn't seem that crazy to say, people really absorb it, a reputation economy. There is actually monetary value to that reputation. If you boil it down, it's actually when people pay for products, they're paying for the reputation of the maker. And this is the core of trademark. Part of the shift has to be an understanding of where the value comes from. And it isn't necessarily the value in owning the fundamental building blocks.
Any industry that cannot take advantage of technology is possibly doomed, because technology tends to reduce costs. It changes the economics. And when the economics change enough, the old business models don't work anymore.
What always happens with technological progress and the advent of new technologies is a form of creative destruction, if you will. Where previous ways of making money or creating value are no longer as applicable, or they are being disrupted or destroyed by the new technologies. And that's always difficult for, say, the individual person whose previous model did not work. The answer is really to be creative, to innovate, and to find new models, of which we've found quite a few. But how do they differ today? Well, those today are using the internet to their advantage. They are creating memes. They're getting, tens and hundreds of millions of views of the videos that they've created and they've gone viral. And they're not necessarily making all of their money by controlling access to their work. They're actually profiting and making their careers by making their work more available and not less available.
Companies have to pay attention to the economics of the network and adapt to it, because they only have two choices, just like Darwin said. You either adapt or you die.
The web itself was not created by a country or a company. It was created by a lot of people who put up web pages with links on them. And what's emerged from that is a knowledge sphere such as the world has not known. We're now at a time where major players, states and corporations and private interests are trying to enclose the web and make it something that they can own and meter the individuals and control.
I've seen how, if left to the political will of the status quo, the internet will have a shape, that is about being like a jukebox kind of entertainment product, and that the whole rules of everything will be shaped to fit that, even though a whole lot more goes on.
I think it's very important that people understand that the future of the web lies in their participation in building it, their collaboration in building it, not just their passive consumption of great content created by somebody else.
Maleren Van Gogh havde hvedemarken som et meget elsket motiv. Han har malet utrolig mange billeder med hvedemarker og en stærk skinnende sol. Og det bruger han som en metafor for menneskelivet. Man skal så, og man skal høste. Men i dag der er det som om, at vi tænker meget mere generelt på at høste i stedet for at så, og skabe mulighederne for de fremtidige generationer. Når man kun høster, så er det resultat af kortsigtede løsninger, ikke langsigtede satsninger, som der er behov for at skabe en meget bedre baggrund for de kommende generationer.
That's what we are now, a time in which everybody wants to get the most out of their possibilities, every country, every person. That's very bad because that means that you don't really get deeply involved in anything. You stay at the level in which you can manipulate everything, you and other people too.
Operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
What they forget, and this is a Kierkegaardian issue really, if you just try to maximize pleasure, you miss what's really important about human beings, that they should be totally committed to some particular thing. Only then can you be a self that isn't in despair.
The fact that we have these tools does not guarantee progress. It doesn't guarantee that the human condition will be necessarily better 10 years from now.
For mig, i forhold til at gå ind i det her eksperiment, er det meget sådan, at det er på vej mod det rum, jeg gerne vil skabe i forhold til, hvor jeg gerne vil arbejde i. Steder, hvor man kan gå til virksomheder, hvor man kan gå til universiteter, hvor man kan gå til startup, hvor man hele tiden kan være i dialog omkring det, man laver. Jeg håber meget, at det vil ligesom være et eksempel, der viser den måde at arbejde på, og den måde at generere viden på, at have en relation med andre på. Jeg har ikke lyst til at være en virksomhed. Jeg er mig. Det er min forståelse af, hvad det er, jeg arbejder med.
The kinds of cooperation, the kinds of collaboration, the kinds of collective action we organize, that's what the future of our species depends on.
Kunne vi ikke gøre det, og burde vi ikke gøre det på en helt anden måde? Skulle vi ikke række ud efter at få et samarbejde med en meget større del af verden til et fælles formål, der så forhåbentlig er, at vi får en renere verden for vores børn?
Can people use the web to do things that they're already really pretty good at and is socially learned to be good at? They can learn to utilize tools that exist and tools that don't exist yet in order to do the things that help us survive as a species, to collaborate and to work together and to learn from each other and to kind of build wisdom and to build knowledge in those things. I choose and try really hard not to give any agency to technology. I try to personify it in a lot of ways because technology is very vacuous and vacant in terms of doing, in terms of making action, and also of all the conditions of being human.
And at the end of the day, what matters is the choices we make about what we do with what we have available to us.
From everything from like social justice up to, political issues and political justice, all those things need to operate in a non-digital world, right? And fundamentally, all these concepts are grounded in like actual human life. But from there, everything up is gravy. You can make things more efficient. You can learn more things you couldn't tell before. There are ways you can analyze and actually utilize affordances of these technologies to either optimize or offer different paths that weren't as easy to do before. But everything, the fundament, comes from that human layer.
I've realized that we are just at the edge of grasping the potential power of these new tools. Using technology to collaborate around some of the world's greatest challenges is of utmost importance to our future. But failing to do so, or using these tools in a negative or harmful way, could equally worsen these challenging situations. Because collaboration depends on our individual ability to learn from our experiences, instead of just believing in what we hear or read. This is vital if we want to connect with the right people who not only speak of collaboration, but also possess the virtues needed to practice it. I feel grateful to have met so many insightful people on this journey. They have instilled a hope within me, because I now know the people to collaborate with and learn from were out there all along.
Started beating, my lungs were bleeding, and all I want is you. From the first time that I saw you, I knew you would be something so very dear and special to me. 'Cause my mind was racing and my heart was chasing, was preoccupied by you. When you looked at me, I swear I could not breathe, 'cause searching down a road.